Hey everyone, Derrick Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Mike Collins, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, my man.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
I'll kick this off with a little bit of a story. During COVID, my wife and I had decided, like before the year started, that we were going to give up sugar for basically 2 months. And that was going to start like basically right around whenever everything happened during COVID. And I remember about a month into that, my practice had changed. We were seeing patients virtually and stuff. And all of our friends were talking about how every night they were like eating cookies and consuming too many beverages and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, actually, I feel fantastic. Like, we've been having to cook because we gave up any added sugars. So like, we can't really find sauces and pre-prepared things that fit that mold. And it was such an eye-opening experience of how many places manufacturers just sneak sugar in. I think that one event 5 years ago, like, we still talk about the places that we found sugar while we were doing that, because we were really trying to stay away from any type of added sugar. So that was probably my biggest eye-opening experience of doing a prolonged like sugar kind of detox, if you will, of like, let's not have it. And at the end of those couple months, we both said, like, I don't know if my like digestion and my body has ever felt this good.
Hey, you're not alone. I hear that story all the time of our success stories. It's actually one of the most important quotes we ever hear is that I didn't know I could feel so good.
Yeah.
And it's like, genuinely, when you get to be an adult, all you're really doing, 95% of the population, is just holding back withdrawals. That's it. They're just stopping the withdrawal process by re-ingesting, right? And a lot of it's unconscious. Like you said, it's in all the sauces and the ketchups and the products and the food, and 85% of the food products in the grocery store, anything that's, in the middle of the grocery store has sugar in it. And they know they do that for a reason. It works.
So explain that kind of like withdrawal process. Let's first maybe set the stage for people in terms of types of sugars real quick. And how those might be a little bit different whenever we consume them. So
I'm gonna, skip all of the, and I got to come up with a better word, the sugar coating here. But at the end of the day, like, we have to eliminate, for at least for 90 days, for a reset, a biological reset, a body reset, all sweetness. And that includes sweeteners and fruit juices and dried fruit. The fructose molecule itself is the offending molecule. This is the problem, okay? And it's not studied or understood well enough to, in the general public, right? And there's an extension to that, which is the emotional blunting that happens with the ingestion of sugar. But let's just stick to the body. I always separate the body and the emotions simply because we've been studying the body for 100 years. We know what's going on there. Little known for the behavioral transformation is the reason people can't quit, and that's the emotional stuff. We'll get into that in a minute. But the fructose molecule is the exact same molecule in fruit as it is in the table sugar molecule. The molecule doesn't change, right? And we used to get this molecule in our body, in our systems, through evolution once or twice a year. That's it, okay? This is what causes the fatty liver. This is what causes the weight gain. And in my world, this is what causes the brain and body intoxication, if you will, the brain and body numbing of the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors. It's the fructose. I always tell people, if you want to get off sugar, study fructose. And, we have an epidemic of 5-year-olds with fatty liver disease, right? And so this is an alcoholic's disease. Like, these children are not drinking alcohol. It's the fructose that's causing the fatty liver and the weight gain and the inability to stop. And so the answer to your question is there is a physical detox. And if you don't know it's coming, if you're not prepared for it, if you don't have a guide, it doesn't manifest itself like I need a beer on a Friday. Like, it just says somehow the limbic brain doesn't need a sweet taste. What it needs is a dopamine hit. And I use dopamine to cover all the things I mentioned there because people understand what it is. But the dopamine is what somehow is able to transmit the need for dopamine into this conscious thought that I should go out in a snowstorm to get ice cream. Okay? It's able to do this, right? And this is where I'm studying, where everybody's studying. I think 10 years, 15 years from now, we'll have the diagnostic tools to figure that out and to be able to make the changes easier. But right now, and you know these statistics as well as I do, 95% of anybody that loses any amount of weight gains it all back in the first year. And it's easy to explain with the paradigm we're going to go over in the next few minutes. But when you're looking at it as just a restriction, then you don't realize what's happening to you when you begin the withdrawal process. It's not only the irritability and the headaches and the lethargy and the true depression, but it's also the stopping of an emotional management system that if you have outsourced for your entire adult life, likely since you were in the womb, but since you were very young, you have not organically handled the daily emotional stresses. God forbid any old trauma, sexual trauma, physical, or things that you didn't deal with. That's still there. But bottom line is we have used this product unconsciously, unwillingly to manage our emotional life, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't understand that process, if we think it's just eat less and exercise more, then we're bound to repeat it, which is what everybody's doing in the $78 billion diet industry.
Right. A lot of what you hear online is that that fructose is not as bad as sucrose. That fructose comes because it's often carried with a fiber, that molecule is okay. Is there a difference between, what's the difference between the fructose molecule and the sucrose molecule whenever they come in the body?
Yeah, just so your audience knows, the table sugar molecule is half fructose and half glucose, right? And we need glucose to live, right? But there's many of very successful carnivores who don't eat any carbohydrates and don't eat any glucose molecules. The body will produce enough to survive, right?
Yeah.
But the fructose molecule, and the research is very clear. Richard Johnson is doing, as a grant from the NIH that believes if he can block the fructose pathway that they can cure alcoholism. It is truly a mood and mind altering substance. And that's why the behavior of change is difficult, right? It's not so much the idea that, it makes you fat. That's what 95% of people come to me for weight loss primarily. Yeah. And they are brainwashed by them $78 billion diet industry to eat less and exercise more. But there's a huge gap in their understanding. And 57,000 detoxes, thousands of one-on-one clients over the last decade. It's at this juncture pattern recognition as to what people are going through when they attempt the behavioral change process.
So let's go to that kind of initial statement where you were talking about how, once people go to it, they're kind of getting stuck into that cycle, right? What is the cycle? What does that look like? And why do we keep getting kind of thrown back through it?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question, and really the bottom line is that we believe, because this is the common knowledge in the market in the world, that if we every diet book you've ever seen, ever heard of, ever listened to, every program has some level of stop the white stuff, right?
Yeah.
They start with sugar and flour, but then they include potatoes and rice, which is wise because it gives glucose spikes. But really, it's like restriction, right? And really, I mean, we have to think of it not as restriction, but as reorganization of our lives into whole foods, right? And when people start the restrictive process, to answer your question, is they begin to get weird. I mean, emotionally, they get weepy and they get depressed and they get irritable and hangry and there's things that literally they've never done before. Things have never come up before because they never made 5 days in their life. They've never made a week. And if you're 5 days to 15 days, you're right in the heart of it, okay? But most people don't make it that long. And again, like I said earlier, it doesn't manifest itself like, oh, I'm getting irritable. I mean, they don't think of it consciously. They say, I got a meeting I got to be at. I can't be like this. And the craving is, let me just grab this thing at Starbucks with enough sugar. And, their subconscious remembers what to have. And they just say that's what they have a quote unquote craving for.
Right.
Okay, that's what they're craving. They're not thinking it all the way through like I need a beer on a Friday because I had a rough week. They know what they're doing. They are just answering the craving or answering the illogical process that the brain is putting them through, where they're not thinking it all the way through. They don't have a guide, so they just succumb to that craving.
Yeah. We talk a lot with patients about like the kind of glucose insulin craving cycle, where it's like you get a high sugar food, you get this massive glucose spike, your blood sugar crashes, so your body starts to think like, okay, well, we need to refeed you. And that makes sense to me, like in the moment, why we get stuck of like, I need another high carbohydrate or high sugar food like today. But what you're talking about is a little bit further into that process where it's like, that's probably not the glucose insulin craving cycle. It's a much more on the dopamine level. Am I right with that? Like it's an emotional craving that you need this dopamine hit that you've been getting from glucose, and you haven't figured out a way to find that chemical balance somewhere else. Is that right?
You've had no need to, right?
Yeah.
This is very ubiquitous product. A child can get it with zero money most of the time. And so through your entire life, you've never needed to build this infrastructure of emotional self-soothing through walking, running, yoga. There's 1,000 ways to self-soothe, massage, pedicure, manicure, hug, sunset, whatever. There's a lot of ways to soothe yourself. But what happens is like you can't fight the biological urge that has been created through this vicious cycle you're describing. You just have a soda.
Yeah.
And it'll shut up for a minute. It'll calm down for a minute. Your boss being an ass, your wife being a problem, it's like you'll just, it'll go away for a minute and then it'll be back tomorrow.
So before we get to kind of like the process that people can start to use for this, I don't know if everybody completely, like we all hear that sugar's bad, right? But what is that doing inside of our body? One of the things we hear all the time is like people are like, man, I feel like less bloated and I feel light. But if we're staying on this high sugar process and we're staying in the routine we're talking about, what's the negatives that are happening inside people's body? Like why should we go through this process? I know we hear of obesity from it, but it's much deeper than that, right?
Yeah. You got a couple hours?
I got all the time we need, man.
So I interviewed Elaine. You know who that is?
I do not.
Elaine LaLanne is Jack LaLanne's wife.
Okay.
Jack, you remember Jack?
Mm-hmm.
So Jack LaLanne was the famous fitness guy. He was on TV when we were kids. And Jack died at 95. Elaine is 99. Okay. And she's about ready to get down and give me push-ups. She's doing legless in the chair, right? And so she said Jack had a saying, and she said, Jack blames sugar for everything. And I've interviewed 400 plus of the world's leading sugar experts, okay, over the decade of our Quit Sugar Summits, okay? And it's all research that's languishing in anonymity. There's an older educator who passed away a couple of years ago, Nancy Appleton, and she had a list, and the list is very, pretty comprehensive with studies, and it's about 5 or 7, 10 years old. And there's 150 different maladies that sugar affects, right? And it's mostly what is popular today is this term inflammation, right? Inflammation is searched, I don't know, I think it's 150,000 times a month on Google, whereas sugar is only, sugar detox or sugar addiction is only searched like 10,000 times. So people are really concerned about their inflammation. And what happens when people get off of sugar, almost instantaneously, their hands and knees stop hurting. And that the inflammation, I really do believe rheumatoid arthritis is a paper tiger. It's really just sugar. And as Jack said, and Elaine said, I have had every single remission known to man, from most of the autoimmune stuff, lupus and chronic fatigue, and it goes on and on. But type 2 diabetes, weight loss. Sugar is a neurotoxin. It's all of the science is perfectly clear and perfectly here. It's already here. It's not, we're not reinventing it, or it's not a guess or a mystery. The damage that sugar does to the body, like you said, the obesity is what people focus on. Yeah. But and this is where I do the delineation between the body guys and the brain and emotions folks, okay? It's like, for 100 years, we have studied sugar. And if you listen to the great stories of the educators who have studied the history, the obfuscation of the research began in the 1950s and 60s, okay? And we've always known this, but the sugar companies covered it up over decades and decades, okay? This is very real. The science is proven. The studies are there. The records from the old sugar companies are there. The history is there. It's all there, okay? Now, our job, your job, my job is to get it out to the public so they can act on that information about how bad sugar is. Yeah. I don't, I vacillate on my approach to helping people understand this. There's an old book back in the day. It's not that old. It's called Change or Die. And mostly it was mostly about cigarettes. Right? Okay. But the bottom line is facts don't work and fear doesn't work. Okay. Yeah. Like people would, in that case, be smoking through their trach tube. It didn't matter. Like in heart attacks, it was about heart attacks too. But the bottom line is I could scare the folks to death, literally, for the next hour. And they could get them fearful. But in my gut, I already know they know this. Right. Our job, your job, my job, is to help them understand how and why when a perfectly good adult, which very high-performing adult, high-functioning adult, says to themselves, I need to quit sugar, they can't do it. They just can't execute. They've got law degrees, they've got medical degrees, they've raised children, they've made millions. They can do almost anything, but they cannot do this. And so we have to focus on this. How do we help them change?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you because I have this conversation. One thing that surprises a lot of my patients is how inflammatory sugar is. They know it's bad for them, but I don't know if they know like that this is driving some of my joint degradation. This is driving inflammation in my knees, in my back, in my tissues. This could be something that's slowing down the repair process of this, torn tendon or torn ligament. And when we have that conversation, I think there's a little bit of skepticism, to be honest. Like they kind of look at me and they're like, I think you're just telling me that. But with what you said of kind of what sugar can do on that, you're like, okay, what's the average American? I think I pulled before this conversation is consuming about 90 grams of sugar, of added sugar per day.
Something, yeah, a lot.
Which is, I don't know. I think I would love to get your thoughts on the recommended daily allowance of it. I think that was like 25 or 30. Yeah, I thought that might be the answer. And I think that's where some of this comes from is like, if I'm in the moment, I can convince myself, like if you're telling me all this, that it's going to change these things in the long run. It's going to cause all these problems, but I don't know how that affects me today. Like, I don't know how that affects me right now. And I'm in the moment and I have to choose between this potential long-term gain of me, living better and healthier over my next few decades, or satisfying this internal urge to have this one little bite of chocolate. My brain is like, I mean, really, like, what's that one thing gonna do? Like, it can convince me very easily that one little piece is okay. Probably like the alcoholic can convince himself in the moment that one sip is okay, that one drink is okay. What's like, I think, what is that cross? What is that chasm that we have to get over that gets us past like the short-term fix versus the long-term gain?
Yeah, I think the only answer is awareness, because that the way this is really a subconscious process. Because what you're asking me, I think I'd be a multi-millionaire and have hundreds of thousands or millions of people involved in my programs, because messaging what you're asking has been my largest thought problem. It's a really, and just because of the way that you articulated it, people aren't all the way there. You can still give this product to a baby with no repercussions. Like, nobody's going to be mad at you. Not like you gave them a beer. It's like nobody's going to be upset. And not 1 in 100 parents are going to turn down the lollipop from the dentist or the doctor.
In fact, you'll probably get the opposite if you're withholding sugar. Look, I've seen this in my own family where like some of my siblings are trying not to feed their kids, and like people around them are like, "Oh, come on, stop being so uptight. Like, just let them have a bite. It's not going to do anything. You're going to give them a complex."
So, look, I raised 2 sugar-free kids 30 some odd years ago, right? And we fought the grandparents, the schools, the Montessori schools, the regular schools, the friends' parents. They all believed that we were depriving them of a childhood. And it's just not true. And if I told you their story, you'd think I was lying to you or bragging or both, It's like, it didn't affect them it was a very positive experience for them and for their life and for their brain development, which I think is those first 1,000 days. So it is an awareness thing, and you described it well. This is our problem. We are stuck like we were with cigarettes and drinking and driving and like that. It's like a societal change. When the science arrives, the science is already here, and then society needs to change. And that's where we are. That's where we sit right now.
I mean, that's the longest process. Look, we've had evidence in medicine that doing a steroid injection for an acute tendinopathy. So like you get tennis elbow, you get, knee tendinitis. Doing a steroid injection for that delays the healing process by like 30 to 40%. Yeah. I bet you today, we've been knowing that research for like 30 years. Today, half of my patients with a tendinitis come in having got a steroid injection. So like what you said earlier, that like facts don't matter, research doesn't matter. It's not what changes our behavior anyway. They matter. That's not what I'm saying, but it's not a behavioral change. Knowing that doesn't drive our change in behavior, even in medicine. Like even in medicine, it doesn't get us to change.
I'll give you an interesting thing, and I've done entire webinars on this, so I want your folks to do something for me. I want them to Google information gathering and then put the word dopamine behind it and look at the studies. People come to me with, they're so knowledgeable. They know everything they're supposed to do, everything they're supposed to eat, everything they know it all. They know the science. They know they need to quit, but they still can't, right? And here's why they can't. And this is also a evolutionary need for education and information, is that this is a true addiction. And they don't need anything resembling a food plan and an exercise plan. They need an addiction recovery program. They need a codependency recovery program. They need a program of support that is couched in addiction recovery, coming from the addiction recovery world. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's a hard pill to message. It's a hard thing for people to understand, that their change process of quote unquote weight loss is really an addiction recovery program. Everybody, addiction in general carries a major symptom, and that symptom, one of those symptoms, is denial. It's like, your friend who's like ruining his life, and you talk to him about it, and he only says, I just drink a little on the weekends. Yeah. You can see it very clearly. And to me, somebody comes to me 200 and 300 pounds overweight. That's where I started back in the day, in late stage food addiction, 200, 300, 400 pounds overweight. And still, when someone comes to me today, 200 and 300 and 400 pounds overweight, they're arguing with me. They're debating the science, and they're debating what they can and can't eat, or what they should eat, or how it should be done. They're discussing this with me, So I don't want to be cynical. I'm trying to figure out the answer to the question we're discussing.
I mean, when you even just framing it like that gives me a whole different thought process. Like framing this as like, okay, if you're going to change this is more in the addiction world than the dietary world. Like my brain immediately goes to like, are you ready to break an addiction? Because like if you're there, like and you're not ready, you don't want to make this change, like nobody's going to be able to help you. You've got to be ready to change your addiction. Do you have the support around you to break an addiction? Like it gives me a whole different set of thoughts than I need to change my diet. That gives me like, oh, okay, like change your diet, try and make these substitutes, do this stuff. Even just putting this in the addiction kind of category, I think makes me think of a whole different set of solutions.
It takes about the arc of a podcast to kind of explain it. And most people, to be honest, that I go on, they're kind of open to it, but they're not willing. A lot of them are health podcasts, and they have a program, and it includes eating less, exercising more, and having these pills and these shakes. And my paradigm doesn't fit with their goals, if you want.
So I'll give you like a thing that I have seen that at least I want to get your feedback on, but then let's kind of dive into the paradigm, because I think people at this point will really want to understand like what are the steps to this. So we have a lot of our patients who do a 5-day fasting mimicking program. great for a lot of reasons. We've done a ton of podcasts on that. If y'all are listening and you want to hear about that, search fasting and you'll see like 10 podcasts that we've done with some experts on that. But one of the things that our patients tell us with that is they're like, I had no idea how much I used food as this little reward marker throughout the day until I took that out. Because for 5 days, like, you're not making decisions. We use Dr. Walter Longo's Prolon kits. You take day one box and you eat day one box, right? You get a soup, you get a snack, you get a soup. And it's like all of that part of your brain is taken care of. So during those 5 days, people tell me all the time, they're like, I didn't know how emotional this was going to be.
Right.
And we have that conversation of like, look, that's what you're doing. You're riding that roller coaster every day of trying to find these little dopamine hits, and we're using food from it. I don't think no one really talks about how powerful that is in the fasting mimicking program, that it starts a little switch. It kind of turns an engine on. So with that, let's kind of talk about this paradigm shift that you're getting out to the people.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. First thing, I do want to make a caveat, and I'm a big fan of fasting. I fast myself, and if people come in with an intermittent fasting program, they can keep it. But in the early days, they should probably, like, before they do your fast, they should probably get off sugar for at least a couple of weeks, because it really does, if people are trying to quit sugar, it does set up cravings, massive cravings, and people who don't understand it and aren't guided well will fall back, just, whatever. They just do.
Yep.
And so we found that fasting in the early days doesn't work. Again, I'm a big fan of fasting. I do it myself a couple times a month, or, even once a week, but and intermittent every day. I don't eat till, I haven't eaten today, and I won't eat till 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. But again, in the early days. But when you talk about what you're asking, the question that you're asking is that you really have to understand that this emotional connection. You have to understand that unconsciously, subconsciously, you have spent, since you're a child, and it's very slight. You ease into it. You don't even notice the weight gain. Most people don't notice the weight gain until they get into their 20s or 30s, even have their first couple kids, and then it's just a couple pounds a year, right?
Yeah.
And they can't seem to shake it. They can't shake the little weight gain that they're getting, and they try every diet under the sun. It's because they're not connecting what we talked about earlier. They're not connecting the idea that their emotional life has been inextricably tied to their sugar ingestion, subtly, and sometimes in the case of, and I only use weight as a marker. You can be a very thin sugar addict. We have a coach that's an ultra marathoner, and couldn't lose the last 15 pounds running 100 miles a week. So it doesn't weight. I just use it as a guide, because self-diagnosed or self-disclosed, 72% of obese people say they're addicted to sugar.
Yeah.
I only use it as a guide. And again, 95% of people come to me for weight loss originally, is that they can't accomplish what they set out to. Again, these are very high functioning folks who just can't seem to do this. But when they start to understand that when they get wonky in those first 30 days, and they have a guide and they have a support community, and they're not alone. 85% of our clients do not have spousal support. Okay, they're not supported by the person. They've changed the diet, and no offense to the spouses, because they've changed the diet around the house 5 or 10 times, and they're not playing this time. They're done. I don't want to start eating dried chicken and broccoli anymore.
Yeah. So
it's like, but it's real, and that this is what's going on out there. And if you don't have an understanding I've redone my 30-day challenge 5 times in the last 5 or 7 years. 5 times, because keep discovering new things from, what people are feeding back to me. And if they don't understand this kind of emotional upset, they don't understand this change process, what the actual change process is that they have to go through, they just slip back. Yeah. And it's a very subtle, somebody will lose 40 pounds, they'll be at their sister's wedding, they'll say, I deserve to have some cake. If I heard that story once, I've heard it 1,000 times, like, oh, I lost 20 pounds and then I had just one, and then all of a sudden they're off to the races again, Yeah, it's in the alcohol recovery world, they call it, what is it, the phrase? Cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's a sneaky little thing. It's not, and it's so societally accepted that you're never going to get any crap for it. Yeah. You're actually going to get like, all right, you're going to have some of my wedding cake. Mm-hmm. They're not rooting for your 40-pound weight loss. They're rooting for you celebrating the wedding. This might not be
the best way to say this question, but what do you see that the people who are successful with this long term, like what light bulb turns on for them that doesn't turn on for the people who fail with this?
That's a good question. I never been asked that question. I think one of the things for the there's a couple, but one of the things for the high performers, and we do surveys all the time of folks who have success, right? And a lot of 100-pound weight loss, a lot of type 2 remissions, fatty liver remissions. My head coach is 73 years old and put fatty liver in remission and lost 60 pounds. It's like a lot of that stuff. But the number one thing that they talk about after they get some abstinence, a true abstinence, zero, like no moderation, zero for 30 or 60 or 90 days, is that their brain came back. They can focus better. They can remember better. And they're calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3 now, And so, and the cognitive, I just saw it this morning. David Perlmutter, the famous, social influencer doctor, right? Neurologist, says, I'm not going to be shy about this anymore. Sugar shrinks your brain. That was the quote. I'm not going to be shy about this anymore. And it's true. And it's like, this lack of their ability to, reason and cognitive and their lethargy, so one of the number one things, the turning point that answer your question is that and the question that we started this whole thing out is, I feel better than I've ever felt before. They're afraid to go back. Yeah. That's a big one. They're afraid to go back. But as far as like getting there right at the beginning before they have any experience, I'm not a big fan of the addiction world idea of a bottom, right? I don't really believe that people need to bottom out. Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You can get out anywhere. You can stop anywhere. So, and that's a big but, bottoms work sometimes. Illnesses work sometimes. Looking at yourself in the mirror or seeing a picture of yourself 100 pounds overweight and not realizing was that bad or looked that bad. There are certain triggers that people tell me about that work. I wish I could categorize them because, again, back to our marketing and help people understand how to get there, I could, splash that all over social media and get, what I mean? But I don't know it 100% the answer.
Yeah, I know like people have a health scare and they're like, oh, I haven't been taking this seriously. Like now let go. For us, pain is a great motivator. I have a regenerative and physical therapy practice, and a lot of people come to us in pain. And when it's top of mind and you feel it in your body, I think it gives you a different level of motivation. But I'm with you. It's like, that's great, but let's not wait for that. Like, don't let it get so bad that all these other parts of your health and your life are affected. So let's go through a little bit of the process, because I know I've talked to people. I talked to somebody this week who said exactly what you said. She went through a fast. She knew she had some mental emotional food issues. Right. And she said, I felt so good at the end of the fast. Like, she was like, I can't believe how good I felt. And I had all these plans to do really well over the weekend. And Saturday, the wheels fell off. I don't know what happened. And she's look, exactly what you said, in shape, fit, by all accounts, healthy. And she was like, it just like fell off, which immediately tells me like, that's all emotional, that's all an emotional trigger that happens. So take us a little bit through the process of trying to get control over that.
Yeah. I mean, largely it's a community effort. It's not a singular effort. Coaching helps, and we do one-on-one coaching, but we don't find, that helps for introverts and it helps get people acclimated to the community. I tell the coaches, you got a real easy job. All you got to do is get them into the community, get them 3 solid friends, and your job is done.
Yeah.
And so they really have to see it in action, because they don't see it in action in the public, right? They do not see it. They don't, like, what's that phrase? You become the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Yep.
And there's a lot of studies. There's a couple studies on this. You become the average weight of the 5 people you hang around. Mm-hmm. So you need to go where it's cool to be sugar-free, where you get your 30-day medal or you get your 90-day medal, and people are celebrating each other's success, and you see it. It's the medical term is mirror neurons, okay? And that works even over Zoom. And you can see this happening. You can see people's face getting thinner. You can listen to old timers, they're called, people that have been around a couple of years. They actually say they say, I was right where you are. I was 100 pounds overweight. I was this, I was that, and here I am now. And when you have a community, a group of those types of people together, it's absolute magic. It's the secret sauce. Because as we mentioned earlier, fear doesn't work. Facts don't work. You can Google everything we talked about with the body part, but if you don't viscerally experience this, then you're out there alone. There's a great line that says the opposite of addiction is connection. And the folks that come to us have isolated so long. A full 25% of the people that call me for coaching are crying. They've never told these stories to any human being, not their husband, nobody. They've never told anybody. They have, it's like your friend whose life is upside down with the drinking. They don't eat the dessert at the restaurant. They're 100 pounds overweight and they don't eat the dessert. I don't use much sugar. But they're willing to tell me, I don't know, it's a persona, the social media, I don't know what it is, but they're willing to tell me that they have thrown the cake in the garbage, poured dishwashing liquid over it, came back an hour later, cut half of it off and ate the other half. And they think I never heard the story before.
Yeah.
They think I've never heard of people getting some donuts out of the dumpster because they're sitting right there on the top in the box. They don't, it's like, but they're willing, if they're willing to like be humble enough to tell these stories to others and finally get out of the silence and the secrecy and the shame, then they can move forward. Otherwise, they just keep repeating the same behaviors and expecting different results.
Yeah, that's powerful. I don't think many people going through this process think of community as one of the first steps of it. Right. So, like, what else is on that list? So if it's getting in the community, I mean, if somebody's starting with that, are they going through their house and like cleaning out the pantry? Like, what's the physical actions that they have to take?
All those things have to happen. You can't have it around the house. It'll start talking to you from the cupboard or the pantry or the refrigerator. You cannot have the stuff in your house. That's rule number one.
So, just because I've had this so much, when we say they can't have any of that in the house, what does that mean? Like, Obviously you're like, I don't have sugar. But let's go through, like, how do they find out if something's got sugar in it that's in the house?
All right, so I'm gonna throw you a little curveball here, and I'm not being rebellious or facetious with you. I want you to understand that your clients will drag you into this food conversation for months and never get anywhere.
Yeah.
Until we default back to what they need to understand. Everything you're describing is in all of the literature, all over the internet, and in our program. We tell you, and I can go through it chapter and verse, about getting it out of your house, about reading labels, about one of the most difficult things truly is, again, defaulting back to the other side of this argument, is that, or this discussion, is that people are, what was I going to say? I forgot. But instead of the emotional part, they're focused on the food part, mm-hmm. and they'll keep swirling and twirling about the food part if they aren't, like, consciously dragged back. I honestly answer the questions. I refer them to the book. I refer them to the program. I refer them to the videos, whatever, because if you get down that rabbit hole, they'll keep you down that rabbit hole. And it's, again, there's plenty of information about this, and I'm not trying to evade the question or,
you don't think it's a knowledge thing. I think is what I'm getting. Like, it's not that they don't know.
And I already know this stuff.
I agree with that on some level, but, like, even with my wife, when we started doing that, I started showing her, like, when we started reading labels, and this might be what happens anyway, but I'm like, no, you see that is actually just hidden sugar. Like, look, go to this part of the label. And it was like, it was a knowledge. She was like, I had no idea. I would have thought that I could have this in the pantry and use this organic, healthy tortilla that looks like a good thing, and I would have read the label and said, no, that's good. Like, I'm following what Mike tells me. Like, I got everything else out of the house. So I agree with you. I think for the most part, people know, but now manufacturers have gotten so good at saying, like, let me find a way.
I'll throw you a little add-on, a little curve, which is, again, back to the behavioral change process. No one's getting this done without learning to cook, okay, mm-hmm. or cooking some for themselves, a lot more for themselves. And more importantly, sometimes is being vocal in a restaurant and asking what you need and what you want. But if you're shopping the inside of the grocery store, you're likely going to fail, because there's, the salad dressings and everything that you think you need on top of this is going to, hurt you. And your subconscious remembers that salad dressing, right? It remembers that it's loaded with sugar, and you put it on this healthy salad, whatever. So you have to shop the outside of the grocery store. You have to cook from scratch stuff that you know exactly what it is. And if you're going to add something to it, you've got to know what it is. You can't just willy-nilly take it out of a box or a bag or a can or a takeout. You can't. It's just, and look, when I look at the money they've spent, when I look at the time they've spent, when I look at the diseases they've had and the medical bills and the time in that and the pain in that, it's like, for some reason, this little tweak in their behavior seems gigantic, and they can't seem to do it, right?
Yeah.
But they never kind of rationalize this. The rest of their life has been spent with a lot more money and a lot more time and a lot more pain. They just don't, and it's mine. It's really, I'm getting kind of strong on this. This is, I don't, again, I don't want to scare people. Yeah, maybe I do. I don't know. Look, I don't think that anybody that comes to you or I with a serious sugar addiction is mentally capable of making the right decisions they need for their health and their weight. They're not in a position, because, and here's how I know this, we all know, we've talked about it, and the brain and the frontal cortex has been hijacked. And the reason I know this, because lawyers and doctors, brilliant, high-performing people, have come back to me 6 months later and said to me, I didn't believe you. It just happened yesterday. Like, I did not believe you. I thought you were crazy. And they couldn't believe they did the whole pour the dishwashing liquid and cut it off and went out in the snowstorm for ice cream. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that was their behavior after 3 to 6 months of abstinence, right? And so I've had clear validation that their brain was hijacked. Their high-performing brain was hijacked, right?
Yeah.
And so, and again, I'm not saying or trying to shame your audience that that's what's happening to them, but maybe I always say, let the information light on you. And if this is resonating with you, any part of this conversation is resonating with you, just try it. You can always go to the 7-Eleven. You can, there's no, going back's really easy.
What's the pushback that you get on this the most? Like, you mentioned time, you mentioned energy, you mentioned money. Outside of getting all the sugar out of your house and cooking more, are there other little things that really help people get over that initial 30-day hump of just going kind of completely away from sugar to kind of break the addiction? But I know there's 2 questions in there, but I feel like they're probably tied together.
Yeah, the cooking one's a big, it really is. A lot of people have never cooked for themselves or in any significant way. They don't like it or whatever. They've been addicted to takeout or processed stuff that they heat up or whatever. So they never really cooked from scratch and never had real control over what they eat. That is a big, as a physical one that, you were asking about before. And the other really, I think, is just this lack of knowledge about what we've been discussing. They've never made the connection. It's just not a connection. Again, I keep using this brainwashed by the diet industry. Eat less, exercise more. Eat less, exercise more. Calorie reduction or calorie deficit is the term. They think that's how you do it. They think you can, eat 1,000 calories and lose weight. But yeah, I think that the real answer to the question is denying. Like, they're denying that they have a real, I think they're denying that they can't solve this themselves. They're fighting the idea that they need help. They're fighting the idea that they need to join a bunch of other, what's the right phrase? I'm just thinking of it now and I'm going to use it again. It's like, what's worse than a reformed drunk? You know what I mean? It's like nobody likes them. They don't want to invite them to the party and whatever. And that happens with the sugar. It's like, no one wants to deal with, because sometimes people get a little superior and a little preachy, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, you shouldn't be eating that.
Yeah.
And after they get well, and they don't want to become that person. They don't want to be the person in the restaurant that turns down that beautiful dessert cart. They don't want to be the person who says, could you tell me what's in this sauce? They don't want to do it. And at the end of the day, what we have is a codependency recovery program. It's a sticking up for yourself program, a saying no program, a setting boundaries program. And if you can't transmit that, like getting from I'm overweight and unhealthy and I have type 2 diabetes and I want to not be, it, like I said, takes the arc of a podcast to kind of like listen and see if maybe this different approach that because 7.6 is the number of diets people who come to us have tried. They've tried 7 different, some more than 10, some,
Yeah.
The average, 7.6.
Wow.
They've tried and they've gained, people relate to this, they've gained and lost the same 10 to 50 pounds like 3 or 4 or 5 times, up and down, right? And they're just tired, and so if they can, again, if any of this is resonating with them, that maybe they're going to want to change their approach.
Yeah. So if people go through, like, let's go back to the sugar thing. Like, one of my questions would be, like, is there a point where, if you've, like, what are the parameters of when you're adding stuff back in? Is there a point where you're saying, hey, you can have some blueberries and raspberries, as long as you're, in this parameter, you've lost the weight, your blood sugar's good. I'd also love to chat with you about tracking some of that stuff, but let's go through the kind of process
first. Tracking and continuous glucose monitors would be helpful.
Yeah.
So the question has been answered over the last decade in what we call borderline foods. So borderline foods are acceptable in some level, not going crazy, not giving a free pass or anything, in or during the detox. And that group of 4, I've added one, it used to be 4, now it's 5, seed oils, because you got to quit seed oils because you'll just feel better at day 10. But that's a start. But anyway, the other 4 that we've discovered are nuts and nut butters, dairy, grains, and fruit. You can take fruit juice and dried fruit right off the list. You can't use those products. But you can have a handful of berries during the process. Low glycemic stuff. You can have dairy. Okay, don't go overboard. You can have some nuts, a handful of nuts. And you can eat grains a little bit while you're going through the detox. But what will happen pretty rapidly is that as you heal, and that's the right word, as you heal, one or all of those might begin to bother you. One of the common ones is nuts and nut butters. Like, people end up eating cashew butter right out of the jar and whatever, and they eat literally whole bags of cashews. And you really shouldn't use any kind of roasted, but even raw ones or whatever. People don't realize that cashews, pecans, and almonds are drupes. They can Google it, DRUPES. They're not nuts at all. They're the seeds of fruit that have been hybridized to take the bitterness out of the seed and then called a nut, right? And so there's a trace amount of fructose in it, enough fructose in it to just keep, that's one of my favorite lines, keep the cravings alive. And who in God's name wants to do this if you're always fighting the cravings? You want to get to peace, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, again, this is at this juncture just pattern recognition of so many people. And I always hate to be authoritarian about this because I am a connectivity guy, and I'm the furthest thing from tough love is that if they would just try it, just listen and try it one time. When I get somebody to 90 days, they don't want to go back. Now, they may slip and they may come back at New Year's or something, but they really, I've screwed up their sugar using for life.
So over those 90 days, like, if somebody's working with y'all, what's that look like? Is it like, hey, you talked about community. Is there like weekly check-ins? Is there, hey, let's go to confessional a little bit? What's that look like?
Telling on yourself is an interesting part of the process, journaling, at least into your journal, but telling is even more powerful when you tell your partners. So when the book came out in 2018, I was kind of semi-retired. So I started to coach people online. And I tell people that I built the company backwards, okay? I knew that I needed to have meetings, support meetings, right? Yeah. Literal support. And so we all the people that I was coaching and people that would come in, we would have meetings on Tuesday and Wednesdays. And I still facilitate those meetings to this day. They've just advanced to the more personal development past detox stuff. One started as a coach's support meetings because we were supporting so many people, we needed help ourselves. But then the pandemic hit, okay, and all hell broke loose. We went from 2 meetings a week to 2 or 3 meetings a day in 18 months, right?
Yeah.
And that's still now 3 to 4 meetings a day on Zoom where people can plug in to a nationally board certified health and wellness coach or a doctor or a therapist. A lot of our coaches are MDs and therapists who 85% of them came through the system, meaning they got off sugar first and wanted to help others, and they facilitate those meetings. So, yeah, the answer to your question is daily, and my goal is 24 meetings a day, 7 days a week. I neglected to do the math on that. That's 168 people trying to figure all that out.
Right.
But, we'll get there.
I like it. I like that.
No, we'll get there.
When somebody is like, for you, when somebody's like, look, I've got this part of my life handled. Obviously added sugar is off, out of their life. Do those kind of like 5 like borderline foods, are you eating some certain fruits? Are there nuts that is that a personal choice for them of like, will I bring these back in? I'll grab a handful of almonds because I've figured out that, they fit with my lifestyle and I'm okay with it. Does that make sense?
Sure. One of the things that is difficult for folks is to test one thing at a time, so that so you're not eating fruit and nuts, or test one thing at a time. Now again, during the detox, these stuff, not that they're fair game, you should try and have eggs instead of oatmeal in the morning, and you should cut back on having just a handful of nuts instead of the whole bag during the detox. But later, if you feel up to it, sure, test something. Test a banana or different fruits, something that's not low glycemic, and see how it treats you. If it sets you up, if you crave sugar or you feel blue, the part that's interesting is that people are, you can actually feel a banana. And this sounds crazy, but you actually get the same satisfaction out of a banana that you used to get out of a chocolate bar. But the problem, this is after, a good 90 days of abstinence. The problem is that sometimes it leads to the chocolate bar,
right.
It sets up the cravings. So you have to be careful, and you have to do, like I said, one thing at a time after you heal up. Like a lot of people ask, can I use some kind of, spelt flour or something? Can I make a spelt flour tortilla and wrap my whatever in it? And I'll say, yes, sure. But get your reset. I call it getting back to the factory settings. Get back to holistic, the way that you were supposed to be. And one of the most amazing things is that if you get like this happened to me 10 or 15 times over the last 30 years, it's like someone will swear there is no sugar in this thing. They're like the salad dressing or whatever. And you'll eat it and you'll know. You will literally have this, after you're healed up, you'll have this buzz, this like 2 martini, 1 line of cocaine buzz. You'll feel like you lit up. And then you'll go through that arc. You'll be starving and you won't sleep well. And you might sweat that night, and then you'll be blue the next day. And you'll be like, you never really experienced it because you were never off of it.
Yeah. Like
you can see it when a birthday cake and ice cream comes out at a 5-year-old's birthday party. You can see the behavioral change. They go nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But as adults, we're just basically fighting off withdrawals.
Yeah. We talked about continuous glucose monitors. How does that teach us some of this stuff? Can we use that especially like as we go through the detox, and probably on the back end of it if you're trying to add stuff back in. But what value do those offer you?
I can't say enough about continuous glucose monitors. I can't say enough about I can't think of another business case study in the world where the big guys, Dexcom and Abbott, helped build these organizations that were venture funded, and then they pulled the rug out on them and went to the FDA and got it over-the-counter units. They're different, they're called biosensors, but they're basically the same thing. and they sell them for like a third or a quarter of the price. So the Hello Lingo and Stello units are magic, and we try to get people. I even give away free detoxes if someone comes to me with a Stello or a Lingo, because I'm trying to incorporate it into the product or the process, because it's so valuable. When you can't lie to yourself, you can't, denial goes out the window when you see the spike in real time on your phone. Like, you look at it and you're like, well, I didn't think that apple would, jack my blood sugar to 200. I didn't think that, like you said, the tortilla with whatever flour would, and then you see the glucose spike, right?
Yep.
And then you're like, you start the day at, 90 or 80 or 90 or 100, and then all of a sudden, bam, you're like, you ate lunch and you didn't realize the salad dressing had sugar in it, and you're at 200. And they also, we can explain to them that if there is a spike, okay, that's good. But if it stays up there and takes 3 hours to come back down, then that's the signal of metabolic unhealthiness, that they're not, metabolic. They probably might have insulin resistance, and they might have a problem. It's like dialing in a video game. It's like, you get this magic view inside, which nobody gets, nobody ever had, because they always say, like you said earlier, it's like, there's only one donut. It's not going to kill me. There's not, like, and then they do that for 20 years. It's like, so I can't say enough positive things about continuous glucose monitors and the newer over-the-counter, don't need a prescription. The reason the other ones were so successful were successful is because they had to set up a doctor in every state to write a prescription for them. And then the big companies undercut them, and now you can just go to Amazon or go to one of the sites and get one for $50 for 2 weeks and less than $100 for a month. You get a continuous glucose monitor, slap that baby on your arm, and pair it with a real sugar detox. It's magic. It's really magic.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. I think the amount of data that we can get from that, what we often will try and have our patients do is combine like a continuous glucose monitor with a sleep tracker, with a step tracker, and a dietary, I saw it earlier, and a dietary log for those 2 weeks. I'm like, look, I'm not telling you got to do this all the time, but for 2 weeks, let's learn what's happening. Learn how your sleep affects these things. Learn how your diet affects your sleep, and everything that gets intertwined. And I think doing that 2 week period often opens people's eyes when we do a full tracking. I can't agree
more, as far as like one of the things that people are upset about the sugar, and we haven't brought this up, and I will. The sugar definitely affects the sleep, and we don't allow. Not that we don't allow it. It's not a boot camp. They can. These are strong suggestions. We ask them not to drink caffeine or alcohol, because it's like wired together, fired together, right? It's like chocolate, tea, coffee. All of these have enough caffeine in them that the body says, "Wait a minute. I got the black coffee. Where's the sugar?" So it keeps the cravings alive again, and you're not able to bust. You need to literally groove a new neural pathway in your brain.
Yeah.
You got to shut down and cement over the one that you've been using all your life, and then you got to build a new one on the other.
Yeah.
You got to build.
The way I heard that explained was like, if there's snow, and like a trench gets dug in the snow, you try and go down the mountain, and it's like you get pulled into that pathway. We need to smooth it over so that you have options of where you want to go.
I like that.
Are there any other things like that, like through the program that really help people kind of break this connection? Are there any other little tips, tricks that people can use? I'm sure you hate those terms, tips and tricks, but
no, it's a lot of people, and we dabble a little touch, but supplements are something that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And really, I don't recommend supplements because I do believe I'll tell you a little story about them in a minute, but almost everybody can use some magnesium. So a magnesium supplement would be good if they're not already taking it. But also, I would like to see them cut down on the majority of their supplements that they sourced on the internet or on Amazon because they read some, they did their information gathering and got some dopamine and they got all lit up and they bought all these things. True story. So this has happened quite a few times and we finally figured it out. It took us a long time to figure out. I've named it supplement use disorder as opposed to substance use disorder because people they'd lose 20, 30 pounds and their weight loss would stall, right? And I'd be like, they're perfect. They're no sugar, no flour, no caffeine. They're exercising, they're eating right, blah, blah, blah. But they still, anyway. So we took a while. We dug in, and we find out that they are ingesting 20 to 30, sometimes even more supplements a day, like pills and not shakes, no shakes in their program, but pills that they're eating. And my theory is that the liver healed up a lot from no flour and sugar, but it's still trying to process all this, and you can't do the weight loss, right? And so when they cut way back or eliminated it, then the weight loss stopped, and they started losing weight again. And so be careful of, just supplements that you read somewhere would be good for this, especially the joint ones and, the things that because that stuff likely will cure anyway if you get off of the sugar.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I feel like that opens my eyes because I've had a few people come off of doing our reset program that said supplements started kind of like bothering their stomach or something like that right after. And I'm like, one of the things I've told people after these things is I'm like, pay attention to the signals you get after when you add things back in, because you're hearing those louder than you've ever heard them. Like if you eat a food and you feel bad, or for the first time. Do you agree with that? You feel like that's...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's that, again, when you heal up a little bit, you start to recognize these signals.
Yeah.
And, people, I think maybe they would have a little pain in the liver, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Even though they were healing up. And they had it right after their 16 vitamins they took that.
Right. So give us a little more of an outline of the program if people are interested in this. What's it look like? What's their kind of commitment to it?
Yeah, I mean it's a 30-day program. The video, they get a video, it's 15 or 20 minutes long. There's an app so you can listen to it while you're walking. That's the basic. The first week is prep week. You don't have to do anything. Just start getting your house. The stuff that I kind of deferred off of. I didn't answer your question really. It's like that's all covered. Like everything, the food, the house.
So there's a video every day. You said a 30-minute video.
Every day for 30 days.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then there's a calendar of meetings where you can go all the meetings and stuff. So there's a lot of infrastructure that came before, our national board certification. It was not, and we're the first sugar group, definitely the first addiction group ever certified there. And so it was, it's a big infrastructure that is like, dare I say, the most loving group of people on the internet because they've all been there. They've all or are in the process with you, right? Like you said about the kids and you quit drinking. Good job. Quit smoking. All right. Quit sugar. You're like, but the body needs sugar. What about this? But what I bake this for?
Yeah.
You get this pushback. And so you need to be in a different crowd or for a time. You don't have to stay the rest of your life, but you need to be there for a little.
What's the app called, Mike?
You can just go to sugardetox.com. sugaraddiction.com. We cover both of them, and then we'll you can get a copy of the book. You can get a copy of for as little as $7 you can get in one of the challenges. It's a real simple process.
I love it. Mike, we ask all of our guests who come on this show, I feel like I know the answer to this question. If people can do one thing today to improve their health, what would that one thing be?
That is a good question. Re-listen to this podcast?
I love it.
I mean, look, it's like, it does take a little bit of letting that information light on you for a little bit longer than just once.
Yeah.
Because it's scary. You have to realize, and this is, I don't know, maybe a dramatization or maybe just a theory, but what's happening when you hear the information that we've delivered today is that all of your brain and body neurons, reward chemicals, are saying, no, listen to that guy. Because you're going to take away their simple, easy system for getting dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. You're taking it away, and subconsciously, not even thinking this thought consciously, guys. You're thinking it subconsciously that, this guy's crazy. Your conscious thought is, oh, this guy's too extreme. But you got a lot of other thoughts. But really, it's this really limbic, low-level brain operation that is calling the shots, okay? And you can't, not that you can't listen to it because you don't have a choice, but you have to be able to override it long enough to get where you want to go.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is one of the more challenging things in healthcare for doctors to get a hold of. It's a hard conversation, and I think it's a hard conversation because you hit it. We don't, even though we know all these other things, we don't have the answer of how to get control of it for ourselves half the time, much less try and help a patient with it. Like they give them the information. Doctors have been telling people to eat less and exercise more for 100 years, and we can see where that got us as a society. So I think it's a tough conversation. I think the information you're giving people at least gives us a few more bullets in the chamber to give people some options of like, look, if you want to get started, go check this out. It'll help you way more than, you trying to fight this fight alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is it's hard, guys. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to, but it is doable.
Yeah.
And we have thousands of people and thousands of testimonials of people who have walked out of this, with some simple process. And one thing I do want to stress, and I've been stressing this lately, is that nobody shows up the first day and then they're done. Relapse is part of the process. Every 2 days you got, or every 5 days you got, you've healed up a little. And you just have to keep coming back to the process. I akin it to meditation. Like everybody thinks when they start meditation, they're doing it wrong. Like they can't silence their monkey mind, right?
Yeah.
Meditation really is returning to the breath, right? And in this process, you have to return to the abstinence, okay? You have to return to, okay, it's been tough. I haven't made, even a bunch of my coaches, took them a year of back and forth. But they kept with it. They stayed with it because failure, if you don't get a 70 plus, you fail out of school, right? But failure in this is to just stop quitting. One of our sayings is never quit quitting, And it seems like you get obsessive, but eventually it takes.
Yeah. So good. Mike, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're putting out. I know we mentioned sugardetox.com, sugaraddiction.com. Is there anywhere else you would want to point people?
The Quit Sugar Summit. If you go there, you can just drop your name. You'll see what Dr. Lustig says about us. You can just drop your name, and when we have one of these summits coming up, you'll be able to hear all the world's leading experts. You won't be hearing it just from me. You'll hear a variety of people who have been heretofore languishing in their labs in anonymity, but they've done all the research that I described through this event, through this podcast. And so you'll if you're sciencey and you need more facts, sign up for the Quit Sugar Summit.
Quick Sugar Summit. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It is rare that I get to articulate what I did here because, like I said, there are different goals for the podcast itself,
Yeah.
And also great questions because I don't usually get great questions. Not always. I shouldn't say that, but it you think you need to be in the health. It's almost like I've had better reception in the addiction recovery podcast than I have in health podcasts.
I can believe that. I think you probably, that might be because you're hitting some nerves in the podcast host's mind and they're getting that triggering response that you're talking about.
In both groups, even in the recovery says, Mike, the reason I had you on is because I want to quit sugar and I can't.
Yeah. I love it. All right, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.